Welcome to the Lovecars On The Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On The Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. There wasn't much in terms of motorsport in the UK. There's a little bit to cover, including the mighty Caterhams at Snetterton. There was Moto GP in Austria. There was Supercars in Australia. SuperFormula was kicking off in Japan, and NASCAR from Watkins Glen in America. And then we're going to have a little debate later on about runoff areas, and it's such a controversial thing. But we're going to kick off.
Well, I think just to lead into that control, I think we're going to look at whether all these runoffs that have been created in the name of safety haven't actually, looking back, caused more big crashes than not having them at all.
Well, we'll come on to that.
I know. I just
very
the
good
point we're going to make,
and we will. That's kind of the point I wanted to make as well. But let's kick off with a bit of news. I don't know what you've got. I've got. What I want to raise is this Crofty quote. So
I haven't heard about this.
Crofty,
what's Crofty been up to?
He's been in the news because he does a podcast, and he said that the last lap of Abu Dhabi 2021 was the most memorable piece of commentary in his career, because with the last lap, of course, everything led up to it, all the controversy, and then to call out someone as a new world champion, and he just got the words just right. And
he thought he did he? That was his opinion on his.
It was his opinion. He's really proud of that.
Oh, Croft! I'd have kept quiet, to be honest. I wouldn't have mentioned it because it's not a commentary most people in Britain, someone would watch would ever want to listen to again. So
I don't think it's just Britain. I think it's Formula One lovers, motorsport lovers around the world, because it was very controversial.
It depends what he said. I've no idea how he talked. I was too about to smash my TV set to worry about what on earth he was saying. So I can't remember.
I think most of us actually forgot what he said. So it's for him to be so proud of that. But I would have kept quiet about it because it was a very controversial. But I still can't believe that moment hasn't been.
Don't
be honest with you. Nearly 2 years on, I'll be honest. I can't believe that hasn't been addressed and put right. But there you go. The Max fans will be shouting at their computers right now.
Don't start already.
Hello, Max fans. You would have been the same the other way around, Max fans. In fact, I think Max fans would have been worse. And I got to mention this because I mentioned it so many times. Lewis and his father, Anthony, I've never seen anyone so magnanimous in defeat when they lost that. Yeah. They both went and shook Max and his father's hand. And I'm telling you what, Jos Verstappen and Max Verstappen wouldn't have done the same.
Also, You're off again.
I am off again.
Let's move on. Better news, more interesting news. Jenson Button's doing what I think he should do, and what quite a few Grand Prix drivers, listen to me, Valtteri Bottas and Mr. Perez, is having a go at Road Atlanta in a Porsche 963 LMDH. So that's great to see Jenson having a taste of the modern sports car world, which I think has got such a great future.
So remind us, LMDH is the same as what these days? It all changes, doesn't it? It's all
that's a hypercar class. That's the world. Okay. But in America, it's the LMP1. They still call it the old-fashioned or GT1. I forgot what they call it now. They use their old-fashioned American lettering for it.
So there's a few Formula One drivers that probably should move over there and do something there.
Yes.
In that.
Actually, talking to Formula One, talking to Max, a plus mark for Max. I noticed he was just stating, that is this Formula One, is it still worth it all? He says, obviously I earn huge amounts of money, but the toll on your lifestyle with the now 24 races around the world, and he says it's not just the travel so much, but amazingly he says that it totals a month of his year doing Red Bull PR work. And I sort of think, well, I don't know how in your contract you could just turn around and say, okay, drop my salary by $1 million because I'm not doing any. Would they let you? I don't know how strict the driver's contracts are, but in a way, if I was him, be lucky enough to be him, that I'd actually sort of say, I'm not going to do it.
Well, let me get something right straight. The fact that I think that it's a travesty what happened in Abu Dhabi doesn't take away from the fact that I'm telling you Max is a mercurial talent. In fact, Zach Brown said something that I thought was brilliant. Zach Brown came out with a quote and said, how exciting the championship would be if Red Bull had two Sergio Perez's. And it's so true. And it shows how good Max is. He is incredible. He's a mercurial talent, to quote your phrase. Anything else in the news from you, Tiff?
No, nothing on the news. As we said, we took a quick trip around the world for the major international events, which was really Austria was the main event in Moto GPs. Not on a circuit I like. It's a real stop, go straights and then tight corners and a couple of quick bends. but it didn't have the best of racing. It really didn't. It's just they're a bit processional. They had a sprint race on the Saturday, which promised to be 14 lap wham bam excitement, but unfortunately all went wrong at turn one when Jorge Martin went for a dive up the inside at the very tight stoop in turn one, where there's big runoff and half the people decide to go running off on purpose to avoid the first corner chaos. So it wiped out half the midfield and spoilt the racing, really. But it was the whole weekend was dominated by Francesco Bagnaia, championship leader, Ducati, and he walked away with a sprint race, bravely chased by Brad Binder on his KTM, the homegrown KTM at the home track. And Jorge Martin, having wiped out half the field at turn one, was then battling through the field. He managed to take out Luca Marini for third place, put him on the floor, go through the chicanes. He wasn't very popular, but he got third place on his Pramac satellite Ducati. So the sprint race was a bit disappointing because of that. And then the main race was just a repeat of the sprint race with Bagnaia disappearing and being bravely followed by Brad Binder.
Well, they're saying in the news, they're saying that Bagnaia is the Max Verstappen of two
dominating. Marco Bezzecchi on the Valentino Rossi's VR 46 Pramac, not Pramac, satellite Ducati. He was one of the ones wiped out at turn one. He finished third in the main Grand Prix. Marini was wiped out in the sprint race, finished fourth. So the team VR 46 has had a third and a fourth, some compensation. And Martin did eventually, during the race, he didn't get a penalty. The commentators would say, whoa, what? And the stewards didn't seem to find him at fault, but they did afterwards, and they gave him a grid penalty. Not a grid, but they had to do a long lap in the Grand Prix, and he finished seventh. So it was mainly the drama of Jorge Martin that made the place come alive, rather than the actual excitement of any racing. It just wasn't an exciting race. Moto 2 had a really good race. Is that because of the
circuit? Is that because of the track? Or?
I think it's half the circuit, half the fact that all the Japanese manufacturers are nowhere. We got Honda aren't anywhere. Marquez was about 18th or something. And Yamaha into, I think, the French guy was about 9th or 10th. So it's either a factory Ducati, factory KTM, or these satellite Ducatis that seem to do so well. I think the dog's barking as the postman. The dog keeps on featuring. Now someone's ringing the doorbell. How can people do this to me when I'm having a podcast? Shall we pause it for a second?
Okay, let's pause. As you were saying before the postman came, Japanese manufacturers, it's a big shame, and people are laughing that they're not anywhere to be seen. But you don't want to be doing that. You want to be doing the opposite. You want to be encouraging them and hoping that they come back, because that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes
the trouble is they've got the same as in Formula One. They've copied Formula Ducati, went straight for I don't know, it was a Red Bull aerodynamicist. They've leapt onto the Formula One, look for the grey loopholes, and they've come up with these special shock absorbers. They've come up with these ride height adjusters, and any rule changes in MotoGP have to be all the manufacturers agreeing. And the Japanese are a bit holding back and haven't really jumped ahead with all this Formula One technology that both Ducati and KTM are using. So again, for the fans, it's high tech is spoiling their racing, and it's the story of Formula One, and it's such a shame to me. You see them doing their starts now; they crouch down over the handlebars, they just nail it. I mean, it's just a full throttle launch, hoping your computers and your anti-wheelie and all the other devices work.
And how it lowers it lowers the car, the bike now. Stuart Higgs was telling us from BSB. Telling us that sometimes in some circuits with the corners, they can't get the ride height back up again. So after the launch control, imagine all this. It's just far too complicated. Go back to more.
Well, it needs the Japanese. It needs the Japanese money. If they walk away, you've just got KTM and Ducati. So and Aprilia, three Italian manufacturers plus the Austrian KTMs. So Moto 2 was a better race. Still a bit of a procession. Pedro Acosta looked like he was going to do a Bagnaia, a walk away with it. He's walking away with the Moto 2 championship at the moment. But the Italian
after a slow start though, wasn't it?
Yeah, slow start. Yeah, you're right. The Italian Celestino Vietti came through. He was qualified third. He hasn't won for a year since halfway through last year. And cruised past Pedro to a quite easy win. So it was a good dice up front, but again, slightly present. Jake Dixon, the best Brit, qualified fourth and finished fourth. He went backwards and forwards with about third and fifth. Sam Lowe's had another old-fashioned Sam Lowe's weekend. Sorry, Sam. Fell on the Friday, fell on the Saturday. Qualified 14th with a hurt shoulders and stuff. And on the second lap of the race was back on his bum on the tarmac again. So he didn't finish. Miserable weekend. Our British rookie, Rory Skinner, had an encouraging. He qualified 24th, but got up to 18th, so he had a better run. Moto 3 was the best race, as it tends to be, of the weekend. A fantastic four-way fight to the finish line. And it really was good. I mean, I think it was... I think it was Sasaki led into the last corner and finished third, because it was won by the Turkish guy, Dennis Oncu, who beat the championship leader, runaway championship leader Holgado, the Spanish boy, by 0.005, 5,000th. Sasaki was then in third, and just pipping to the finishing line, this Dutch kid who's finished fourth, but he was in the bunch all the way. He actually was on pole position. Colin Vieja, can't pronounce Dutch very well. Apologies already to Yerry, you'll be writing in a minute. But it's given... Yerry's one of our most enthusiastic contributors to the comments below, which is very interesting. Every week we hear from Yerry. So, Yerry, I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear that he's the first Dutch rider in any Moto Formula to be on pole position since Jurgen van den Goolberg. Sorry about the punctuation, Yerry. 1999. So, good news for Dutch motorbike fans is you might have a Max Verstappen arrive. Is remember that name, Colin Veja.
Do you know how old he is?
18.
Yeah,
18-year-old bike rider. On pole, really nice kid. Interviewed. So he was fourth, having gone from pole position. So some excitement for Dutch bike fans. And Dutch bike fans, that Assen track, one of the best Moto GP weekends of the year. Great overtaking racing circuit. British boys didn't do so good. He had Scott Ogden, our leading Brit, on this wonderful Vision Track racing team, or hopefully will continue for another year or two, because they haven't had that much success. But Scott qualified 15th, which tends to be where he is nowadays. But in the wet, he qualifies his front row. I mean, he seems to have an amazing skill and subtle touch in the wet. But he battled from 15th down to 19th and back to 15th, and ended up 22nd with a 5-second track limit penalty. And Josh Watley qualified 28th, finished 27th. So disappointed. Scott, he never seems to... I think he's a very delicate, sensitive rider. I don't know anything about riding bikes, to be honest. I'm just guessing completely here. But he's not good at elbows out in the dry. You know, these young foreign kids that have got a lot more experience than them, you know, elbow their way through the bar. He always drops positions on the opening lap, Scott. I've never seen him gain places on the opening lap in a dry race. So maybe he gets a third year and gets his elbows out. We can have Scott Ogden challenging Colin Veja for the rookie of the next year. But anyway, Moto 3, always entertaining.
Even at Austria.
Yeah, even around the Austria. I mean, it's such a scenic place. That's the problem with that track. But of course, I raced on the old Osterreich ring, battling for the lead of a Formula 3 race till the battery went flat. I'll never forget that one. One of those ones that got away. But it was such a fast-flowing, you know, really quick circuit with an amazing
Why do you need a battery once you're going? Why do you need your battery when you're running?
We've got no alternator on, I don't think. Maybe it has. I don't know. Does a Formula 3 have an alternator? I don't know.
Yeah.
Extra weight, isn't it? No, the battery died.
Gutter.
Such a good... It was such a gutter.
I've had plenty of them, don't worry, but not quite that same level. So from Austria, we add another L or so. I have my spelling's not very good. And we go to Australia, down under, for Supercars.
That was a good attempt.
That was a horrible...
Yeah, that was terrible. That was rude.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was Brad Kostecki. Swept the Bend, as the Americans would say. The Bend is the name of the track, very imaginative naming of a racing circuit by the Australians. It was only built about 4 or 5 years ago. But Brody Kostecki also went, he's looking at NASCAR, he went with Van Gisbergen to...
Can I, sorry to interrupt, I don't like interrupting you because I love your voice, you're very knowledgeable, but why don't all circuits have bends and corners named after people like Lewis Hamilton or Mark Webber?
I'll tell you why.
Tell me, has the bend
got
a Mark Webber curve? Mark Webber corner or straight?
I don't know. You've obviously asked me a question. I don't. However, going back to your why circuits don't have more names is because these idiot new circuit designers, what's your name, especially him, they have 22 corners on circuits. And 22 names, you'd be talking about the name of one, but you know, like you say, Brands Grand Prix circuit, you know, you're through Stirlings and out through Brabham and Graham Hill, and yeah, I agree, but they have so many corners. if you started to name one, you'd run it. Oh gosh, right, we've named 7 corners. What on earth should we call the 8th corner?
And I'm telling you this as well. Pat Blakeney, who runs Thruxton, who's a lovely man, he should call one of the corners, probably the chicane or something, change the name to Needell, because you've done over 8,000 laps there. That's your home track. So that's...
If I'm going to have one, it would have to be Tiff's turn.
There we go.
Tiff's turn.
Yeah.
Anyway, so down the straight at the bend, it seems they got the parity between Fords and Chevrolets almost correct now, because in all 3 races, now this is a bit of a pub quiz, Kostecki won all 3 races in his Chevy, followed by 3 Fords in second, third, and fourth. Not always the same Fords in each race, different Fords. And then in 5th place in all 3 races was the other Chevy of Shane van Gisbergen. So that's quite a sort of Chevy sandwich.
Yeah.
But Kostecki, he's only 25. He's like the next Van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen is now 100% going off to do full NASCAR. His dream is coming true, which is fantastic. But I think Kostecki's there'll be a few other Aussies now looking at how Van Gisbergen gets on. Surely earning more money, racing a lot more in America. So seeing how Shane gets on, he's making the pathway then for Aussies and Kiwis to head to NASCAR. But those 2 top the points table. Kostecki's in 1st and Van Gisbergen 2nd. So exciting stuff then. Aussie round the bend. And then we got to SuperFormula Japan, which is a bit north and east, and doesn't share the same letters at all, just to let you know. It's got an A in it, I suppose, 2 A's. Montegi, I think it is.
Montegi, thank you.
And this begins our dispute about track limits and track extensions and whether or not they actually cause more crashes than they save. Because we got Liam Lawson, trying to be the next Red Bull Grand Prix driver. We're all looking at how he's getting on. I'm sure the team will be looking very closely. He was 1 point behind the championship leader, Ritomo Miata, going into this race. He qualified 3rd. Miata was 8th. So it's all looking good. 1 point, just take it steady. Turn 1, he tries to go round the outside of his teammate.
Too aggressive, yeah.
And the point is, round the outside is that there's a little curve, the red one, and there's a great big green bit before the gravel. Now that's car's width. So because you think you can get away with it now, because you've got road to use, even if it's illegal to overtake off the road nowadays, he tried it on, kept going around the outside, got a bit bumpy, and then it just swapped sharp right into the middle of the pack. Caused a massive shunt. One of the Japanese guys had to go to hospital to check, had a bit of chest injuries, he's fine.
If you haven't seen it, it was a big old shunt.
Yeah, go to motorsport.com. They're great. Yeah. Go to motorsport. They've got all these links. You can see it. I'd mute the commentary. I'm sorry. I think it's I checked the name and I forgot the name. The commentator. I mean, he's such a race fan, but he just screams non-stop. And I did get your name because I hate saying the commentator, and I haven't written it down. I had it somewhere. And he's an enthusiastic commentator. Maybe some people like that style. Tell us below. But he just screams, shout off, just too loud. Anyway, so in the end, I mean, Lawson was able to restart because it was red flagged and he had a new rear wing put on, rebuilt the car. I think, I'm not sure it was totally legal to do so, but apparently it was. And he managed to finish 13th and got a point, I think. Miata was finished 4th. So now Liam Lawson's 8 points behind with a double header at Suzuka. Right at the end of October, they have to wait. Why do they have these huge gaps? Who makes it
too long? Maybe
it's rainy season or stormy season.
Yeah, but he learned from it. And I'm not condoning it. Far from it. The opposite. But he learned from it. Yeah. I was probably too aggressive. But I've mentioned this as well before that I've done the same. If you get one track limit, so you're trying to gap someone behind you, particularly in a Caterham where if you want to break the toe. So you can push it so hard, especially somewhere like Silverstone, where you've got massive runoff, push it going into that Beckett's, Cops, all that sort of complex around there. And you know that you run off and you might get one black marking in your name, but you don't, it doesn't matter. So you make an overtake, you get onto the straight quicker, you cheat. Absolutely. You cheat. Yeah. And it gives you an advantage because it's there to be used. But what's the alternative? Make them all like street circuits where you close it all in and there's no runoff.
Well, that's what we're going to. I'd take most of it away. I mean, the point is it's gravel traps. I agree. Most people just straight away say put gravel to the edge of the curve. Moto GP have got it sorted. They've got their, if you touch the green, of course you can see it so easy. The judges have fact it's so easy to see as soon as a bike, these little tiny wheels go on the green. It's visible. But otherwise, And there's always this debate because the bikers don't like gravel near because it flips them and causes them injury. They want that tarmac runoff when they drop the bike because it slows the bike down. But I've been thinking ahead of that about that because there aren't that many circuits now that have Formula One and Moto GP. So you could just say, well, okay, we don't share circuits. I think Imola they go to, but I'm not sure whether Moto GP does go to Imola. I think they might do. Barcelona for certain, both go to, and Austria, that Red Bull Ring, they go to. And Silverstone, I mean, go to Donington. I think the bike fans of Britain would prefer to see the Moto GP at Donington. It's more the traditional motorbike track. It's more spectacular. There's better viewing. It's not in a huge spread out area.
Yeah.
They don't do Monza. Qatar, that awful Qatar track, which Formula One signed a 5-year. God, I don't really care about Qatar.
Money.
And of course, they go to America. They go to the Americas. But the motorbike, they look a bit stupid around there. I think, again, that huge, when you have a huge area, like the American track, what's it called?
Circuit Americas.
Circuit Americas. The bikes just look too small and too far away and too distant. I mean, it's a great track for the bikers to race on, but there's loads of road courses. They could go to Road America. As
a racing driver or rider, you want to race at Silverstone. But I agree, Donington would be a far better spectacle for the spectators and for the racing. I agree.
But this runoff, the whole runoff area was really brought. What made me think. So I watched NASCAR. So NASCAR, well, they're at Watkins Glen. They only about 4 road
massive crash there as well.
It wasn't, was there?
Yeah,
I missed it. Yeah. Road America. Where?
I got it on my
notes.
Looking
at the Xfinity race on the Saturday, were you? Not in the NASCAR race. There wasn't.
Yeah, the Xfinity race.
Yeah, they had a good old shunt or two. Because the NASCAR solution, when they go to road courses, whether it's Circuit of Americas or anywhere, is that you don't have track limits. They just let them go. So the point is, especially turn 1 and out of the corkscrew at Watkins Glen. So quick question, just to get off into the car park and back on again. But of course, if you go into these tarmac safety zones, all you're doing is taking your car back to rut next to the wall, which is why they put the runoff areas to get the cars away from the wall. So NASCAR just let them run out to the walls. And if they exceed the limits, they crash.
Yeah, what's
that
the
one? That was
Xfinity race,
there is the turn 1. There's the runoff area that's the one where they all go into. So they just ignored it. They just go over the curb. And it actually makes it quite spectacular because they leap and bump over the curbs. So either you do that, which I'm quite happy for NASCAR. They only go to about 4 road courses and let them do it. When they go to Road America, this beautiful circuit without all these runoff areas, they don't go off because it's grass and then they're in the wall.
What's your solution?
It's just made me think.
You're head of the FIA. What are you going to do? What are you going to implement? What are you going to say?
I think it has to be gravel right to the edge. But yeah, I mean Spa. Spa's the awful one. But always.
But you have gravel, then you're going to have lots of yellow flags, potentially lots of red flags,
because the cars are stuck in the gravel. That's what I was going to come to. This is half the. But I mean, if you wreck a car,
not your bloody invention again of the
or cranes, anything, just to grab them. A crash you, those claws. It was a touring car, just crash the car. That'll teach you to go to the gravel track. But you look at La Source, the hairpin at Spa, right? They gravelled that. And we all thought, flipping, they'll end of every opening corner. There's going to be one stuck in the gravel. There'll be, safety cars, even Porsches. But I've hardly seen anyone in either the GT World Championship, the Formula One, the Porsche Supercars.
Well, that's a very, very good point. Because as a driver, when there's gravel, you avoid it. It's as simple as that.
That's the point.
You know your race is over. So
and what they used to do in the old hairpin, they used to go wide to get a faster exit down the hill to Eau Rouge. So they used to deliberately go out. Cheated. Now nobody cheated. Yeah. And when I look at Eau Rouge and the dreaded what's the top half of Eau Rouge?
Don't know.
The left-hand bits you do, it's always in the news.
I know what you mean. Dangerous.
So if you look at the older, I saw a board of Jean Alesi in a Formula One car. When you come to the top left-hand kink, the barrier comes out to join you. Now, I can't remember in all the world sport, they used to have crashes in the bottom of Eau Rouge when you first turn left and right, but I can't remember anyone really up the top of the hill having that big a crash. But now, of course, that you've got that runoff to use. So if you go in too quick, you then go over the brow off the circuit. You then got to bounce over the curb to come back on again. And it can cause crashes. And I sometimes do think that you watch now on, especially Motorsport UK, that televise a lot of the GTs around the world. There's so often we're seeing these very expensive shunts because people are just flying in, knowing they can go off, back on again. And it's almost that they come back on again at racing speeds, expecting the competitors on that to move over and give them room.
Yeah.
Some of those people, you haven't got much peripheral vision is less in modern racing cars. And they just rejoin willy-nilly and just cause huge shunts. So
it's no good asking me what a circuit, what a name is on a corner. That's why I want them all named after drivers, because I don't remember anyway. But paddock corner,
Radial.
No,
it's not Radial.
No,
it is.
Paddock
yes, it is Radial.
Is that's a good example. Gravel all the way. It's a really undulating corner,
and yet they've still got track limits. This is one that's classic. So they've still got the tarmac and the white, and then the curb, and then a bit of green. But if you go on the green now, fully on the green, your inside wheel will be over the white line. So that's track limits. But outside the green, there's gravel. So if you're a driver wanting to drive around the track, you just go to the edge of the gravel until they started putting track limits in. So I said to Jonathan Palmer, just dig up the green bit and move the gravel to the edge of the red and white curb. Sorted. But
he obviously values your opinion, because it's still exactly as it was before.
Well, Jonathan, I also told about my wire grabs to grab cars on their toe. And I think that would work. You just run out, one marshal runs out, hooks the tow rope.
No, I agree.
Winch it back in. Winch it back
electric
off the track.
winch, electric.
So I think it has to be gravel traps, because the track, it's if you have slippery surface, the other option is that the bit outside. The green bit is made of a slippery paint. You get what happens with Liam Lawson. You'll risk it, and then you'll spin into the pack and wipe out half the pack.
Yeah, see, I like that idea, but I don't mind having a little bit of runoff to not to encourage, but just if you do make a mistake for a couple of feet, I don't think you should be penalised.
But it needs to slow you. That's the point. If you go outside track limits, you need a surface or some bumpy curbs that just slow you a bit. But unfortunately, Liam just tried to stay in it. He tried to stay on the power to make the manoeuvre happen. Anyway, Watkins Glen was another. We had a NASCAR race last weekend. I said it was just a proper motor race. No real, big dramas. Just a really good heads down road race. Only one full course yellow in the middle of the race, which actually upset a couple of drivers that got caught in the pits and stuff. But it was just a long classic road race. Really, I mean, the two that fell. Michael McDowell that won at Indy. He looked like he was the fastest car, but he had a pit limit, penalty for going in too many boxes. He had to do a penalty. And Kyle Larson was speeding the pit lane. He'd been running third.
What do you mean went in too many boxes?
When you're coming into pit, you've got a box each. Right? And to stop you sort of going in 10 boxes before, so you can come straight into your pit, you can only allowed to go to 3 boxes.
Okay.
So you can't, otherwise you'd wipe out other mechanics, So you're only allowed to go to 3 boxes to get to your box. But then his engine blew anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. But it basically left William Barham dominated really and won quite easily. But it was a great race. But Denny Hamlin was a DRS train. It was a Denny Hamlin train of cars, because overtaking was really hard. And that's what I mean, a proper old-fashioned motor race. There were probably only 5 or 6 amongst the top 10. There's only about 5 or 6 overtakes, maybe. But every night, because they can follow close, they were putting the nose inside and thinking about it. And then you try to exit the previous corner and stay close, which is what proper racing is. So there were, as I said, Denny Hamlin was like a train up front and hardly anybody got by him. So just racing. Chase Elliott, the one that caused the only full course yellow, was when Chase Elliott broke down, ran out of fuel. And he's there. He's a fan of favourite driver, and he's still not in the points playoff. He hasn't got enough. He hasn't won any. He hasn't got enough points to get into the last 16. So he has to go to the Daytona 400 finale next weekend, which is the last race to qualify for playoff points, having to win. So there's about 3 drivers that haven't won that could win anyone could win through, because there's 3 drivers in the top 16s without a win. So you can kick one of them out if you win the Daytona 400, which is a sort of lottery race. So,
So it's tight. Exciting.
But not, no big drama. There wasn't much overtaking, but it's just seeing lap after lap, close formation, people nipping and tucking, looking for an opening, trying to make an opening, trying to push pressure. That's what motor racing's about.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
DRS hello, I've got my DRS open. Have you got your DRS open? No, I'll drive past you then, shall I? Oh, thank you. I'm gone.
Well, that is a nice link to bring on to Caterham's at Snetterton.
Because Caterham's. I said there was nothing on in Britain. You mean there was Caterham's last week?
Yeah, there was a couple of things in Britain, actually. I want to mention a couple. Caterham's, honestly, if you've never been to a Caterham race, don't go to Silverstone. Go to somewhere like Donington or Brands Hatch, or Donington's in 2 weeks' time, actually. Go to Donington in 2 weeks' time. The racing is phenomenal. They take the mickey out of me because I still watch all the YouTube lives and go if I can. But it's just phenomenal racing. Any one of 8, 9, 10 people could win with a lap to go. It's just incredible.
Slipstream, good slipstream,
especially at Snetterton's. Huge slipstream down the Bentley Straight there. But a new winner, Duncan Mallet. He did incredibly well. He's won before, but
which class are we talking about now?
Well, that was in 270. He went from Academy. I think
the one that you dream you're still in. You mean?
Yeah, the one that
where all your mates are. Where your mates are
still there. But Charlie Lower and Freddie Chinnix go to the last round of Donington. I think absolutely dead level on points, which is exciting. But
another reason to go to Donington then. When is the Donington finale?
2 weeks' time, 2nd, 3rd of September. So please go there if you can. I'll be there on the 2nd. I'm away on the 3rd, but
I'll have to see what else is on my calendar on the 2nd and 3rd of September.
What is on? And whilst you're doing that, can I tell you?
There's no BTCC and there's no British GT. So yeah, there's a good reason to go to Donington. There's nothing else happening in Britain.
I cannot tell you how good the racing is. It's so good. And if you can't get there, just watch it on the live stream or catch up a little bit. But the driver of the weekend, without any question, was an Academy driver called Megan Bruce. And Megan, there's a clue in the name that she is a female. She got a podium, 3rd place in the Academy race. So the first female podium driver for a very long time.
Academy? Yeah,
an Academy. Absolutely brilliant. So
what's her previous best result? She's been top 10 runner, or
she's done well in qualifying, but not really. She's been top 10, yes, quite a few times. She's always there or thereabouts. But you know what it's like. Maybe she's not quite as aggressive as some of the others. And
aggression is the thing.
You need a bit of aggression. So hopefully her father's going to do it next year. If he wants to sponsor us, he can. Andy. He's going to do 270. Megan will probably go up to Road Sport, so we can have a nice little team. But the Caterham racing is absolutely fantastic. Well done to Megan Bruce. And I also want to mention a brilliant little bit of class that I saw. It was the AirTech Fiestas. I think they were at Silverstone. I don't know where they were, but these young
AirTech Fiestas.
Yeah, they're racing these Fiestas, and it's just something that I saw Paul O'Neill mentioned, and a couple of lads. You got Albert Webster made contact with Alistair Kellett, and then he gave the place back. He moved right over. This guy Span or was they were the outright leaders, and he held back and let this guy go in front. Now I don't know whether he did that. I'm taking that as a really classy move, as is Paul O'Neill. And I just thought it was really good for a youngster to do something like that. But maybe he did it because he knew he was going to be asked.
Didn't want to get excluded. Did he get by? Exactly. Did he re-overtake him? Did he get bypassed him again?
Do you know what? I don't know who finished that race. We'll have to have
fancy building us up with a story like that,
not knowing the ending. Suspense. Who
I thought that was the whole story you're about to tell me, and then he went back past him.
No, I should have looked at that.
Oh, there are times.
And I've got an and finally. Have you got any and finallys? Anything else to add before my and finally comes in?
No, it's just what's this weekend. Of course, loads this weekend and quiet last weekend. It's
okay, you give us what's coming up, and then I'll give you the.
It's Zandvoort. It's the Orange Army, their home territory.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be absolutely.
The organisers are trying to ban orange flares. They're trying to tell the Dutch to behave after there was a bit of controversy at Red Bull Ring a couple of years ago, weren't they? Apparently alleged.
We're football fans. We get every weekend.
I know. There's always someone out there, but they're going to try and calm them all down again.
We get shouted at. We don't make any money.
Is there a sprint? Is there a sprint? I don't think there's a sprint. I'm not sure. It wouldn't be very good because it's not a good track. It's a rubbish track again, despite their great spectacular banking. A very limited overtaking. The Formula 2 cars are there, no Formula 3s. They're missing this one out. Indy cars are back on an oval at the Gateway Oval, a 1.25 mile oval. So that should be good to see Indy cars back. NASCAR, as I said, it's this last chance saloon for the to qualify for the final 400 miles, not the big 500 that starts the season off. where they'll all just sit there, nose to tail, 200 miles an hour, touching bumpers, just waiting for the big crash, slowly working their way to the front. So that's always spectacular. Now, the IMSA sports cars, they go to Virginia in America, so 2 big events in America. Whereas back home, brilliant weekend back home. It's exactly the same as a week and a half ago, because you've got the British Superbikes and the British touring cars to choose from. Donington in the Midlands for the touring car boys, our Cadwell Park, the magnificent Cadwell Park circuit for the bikes. So if I had a choice, I'm afraid touring car people, I'd be watching the bikes at Cadwell Park, because that's just one a spectacular circuit.
It's a proper old school circuit, isn't it, Cadwell?
So plenty of racing internationally, and which we'll be reporting on from Britain next week. Lots of fun for enthusiasts.
And finally,
oh no, you've got one, have you?
Well, we haven't got many listeners these days. It seems to be going down and down and down. Which
Yerry will be happy. Yerry keeps on point. Our Dutch fan is often telling us.
Thank you all that do listen and watch. If you do happen to be in Japan this week, on Thursday, our TV show is live in Japan. I think that's the world debut in Japan, bizarrely. So National Geographic, Japan, I don't know what time, but...
You won't hear me or Paul, though. You'll hear some Japanese person impersonating us, which I love. I love meat, hard, peas. It's brilliant. I can't pretend to talk Japanese, but if you watch it, it's very entertaining, actually.
Konnichiwa.
I might watch it myself.
Konnichiwa. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Konnichiwa.